Nottingham City Council is facing a £23 million black hole. That means they don't have that money. And it's looking likely that the council will today have to declare bankruptcy. What does that mean if you actually live there?
And with councils across the country facing similar dire financial situations, we're asking this morning, how much do we rely on our councils, and what would happen if they stopped taking our rubbish, for example? What if they closed down your local services or even stopped cleaning your parks? Worse, though, they're responsible for our health and social care.
Yeah, but you know what? This is the sort of thing we used to hear coming out of America all the time. And the more... I remember going to America 30, 40 years ago and looking and saying, this is like a third world country. You know, the idea that Russia was supposed to be a third world country and they compared it to America. Roads. Have you ever seen the state of roads in America? Well, we are adopting their systems increasingly more and more. And look what's happening to our councils. I mean, did you ever hear in the 1950s, the 1960s, councils going bankrupt? No, you didn't. But that's what we're debating today. Should local councils be given more money, given less money, have more power or less power? Well, the Deputy Editor of Conservative Home, Henry Hill, is joining us this morning. He thinks they should, whereas the elected Mayor of Watford, Peter Taylor, totally disagrees. Can I start with you then, Peter, on where exactly you stand? Do you think that councils should have more power? But, you know, when we look at Birmingham, which is the most recent one to go bankrupt, they had this settlement about equal pay, so you can understand why there was this big black hole. What's Nottingham's excuse? Why should you be giving more power when they can't seem to balance the books?
Well, you're right that Nottingham's just the latest council. There's been a whole series of them over recent years. And what we've seen in the last 10 years is a 50% cut in real terms in government funding for local councils. So if you cut the funding, if councils don't have powers to raise money themselves, then this is the inevitable consequence. OK, when you say when you cut the funding, who is cutting the funding? Just explain to people how you are funded and what is happening, because you're going to be kicking against an open door here. We're lying politicians at central government here, and they make out, nothing to do with us. We give them the money. It's up to them how they spend it. But they're not giving you the money, Peter, are they? No, so Watford Council, about a third of our income comes from council tax, another third from fees and charges, and a third's made up from other sources. If we look at the amount that comes from central government, that's been cut by 50% in real terms over the last 10 years, and that's the same right across the sector. So The Economist did an article recently looking at funding for local government. Across local government, in real terms, if you take account of inflation, the funding from central government's gone down by 50% in the last 10 years. Peter, but let me ask you, sorry, I'm not saying, no one's telling me what party you represent. What party do you represent? I'm a Liberal Democrat, so none of the councils that have gone bust are Liberal Democrat councils. Right, OK, but so what I'd like to say is that the Conservatives who have been in power for umpteen thousand years, they have got a lot to answer in terms of the infrastructure failing in this country then. Yeah, absolutely. We've got big challenges for local government. We're the ones right on the front line. So if you think about things like social care, people in temporary accommodation, the demands on our services have never been higher. And so we've got big demands on our services and less money. So the number of people that work for Watford Council has halved in 10 years, but people still expect their bins to be emptied, clean parks. We do our very best. We're definitely not going to be declaring bankruptcy anytime soon. But there's a big challenge for councils right across the country. Let's bring in Henry Hill in all of this. Do you think that this is an issue, a sort of party issue, the mismanagement, arguably, of Birmingham or of Nottingham City Council? Or do you think this is an anti-devolution argument that, you know, this is an example they can't manage at a lower level?
I mean, as you say, Birmingham was effectively ambushed by some changes to the law, which frankly shouldn't have happened, where if essentially a judge was able to rule that because a better unionised part of their workforce was predominantly male, and therefore fought for better pay conditions for 40 years, that was inherently sexist, and that suddenly they were liable for a huge pay claim all the way into the past. I think the problem that local council have is that they're responsible for social care. Now, social care is an enormous responsibility, and the only reason it's a statutory local responsibility is essentially to keep it off the government's books, right, the central government books. But that means, if you think about, that we have an ageing population, that a huge number of councils, more and more of their budget is consumed by social care. And that means they're not doing the kind of thing that you think local councils should be doing, right? When you pay your council tax, you're thinking, oh, OK, I'm paying to prettify my high street, deal with my bins, parks and so on. Actually, very often you're just paying a social care tax that's not called that. So I think that that's a responsibility that should be taken by local government. The other big one, which I would take away from local government personally, or at least restrict, is planning. Because I think that one of the key drivers behind the fact that we have a housing crisis is that housing is a national need, but councils are responsible to local voters only, who very often don't want new housing. It frankly shouldn't be up to them. Housing is a national requirement.
So, Peter, there's a couple of things that we were talking about. You've got your hands tied behind your back. If you were freed up from housing, if you're freed up from social care, do you think you could actually do a decent job?
I agree completely about social care. So I know for some county councils, 70% of what they're spending is on social care. So it's a huge part of their budget. We've got a social care crisis. When Boris Johnson was first elected, he said he was going to sort out the social care crisis. We've seen nothing of that sort. On planning, actually, it's really important that local people can decide what's best for their areas. That's the point of local government. So if you get rid of local councils, all you'll have is a lot of anger about towns and cities changing and people not being able to influence that.
Can I just ask you, Henry? Sorry, say that again.
I said you'll also have the housing we need. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, Boris Johnson was mentioned there in relation to social care, and he came out saying he was going to reform it, and I think he wanted to put a penny or something on national insurance when it came to that. And now there's lots of talks about that being cut tomorrow in the autumn statement. Can we afford tax cuts when we're hearing about the sort of burdens that we're talking about in social care, in local councils? I mean, can we afford any sort of cuts when we can see the state of the nation?
I mean, I think the argument for tax cuts, it's not slam dunk for sure, but the argument you could make for tax cuts is frankly that currently we have a system whereby working age people are paying vast amounts of tax in exchange for the state and public services, which largely benefits other people. Social care is maybe the most egregious case. Think about Theresa May when she tried to make older people with lots of housing wealth pay for some of their social care costs, not all of them. But she said, if you have a home that's worth hundreds of thousands of pounds, you should maybe have to put 100,000 or so into your social care. And and she almost lost the election for that. It didn't work. But no, we do have hugely overstretched public services. We do need more revenue. But I think there is a fair argument to make that working people deserve a break. And if we do need to raise more money, there is essentially wealth, housing wealth, other wealth, that we could tax instead to make up that shortfall.
Gentlemen, the clock has beaten us. We've got to say goodbye to both of you. Peter Taylor, he is the Mayor of Watford, the elected Mayor of Watford, and Henry Hill, Deputy Editor of Conservative Home. Thank you both. Very, very interesting discussion. Thank you very much.